When Jamal was 8, he lost his grandmother, the person who tucked him in every night. So at the time he understood she was gone, but not fully what that meant. As he entered his teenage years, the loss resurfaced in new ways, in his dreams, in conversations about family history, and in the loneliness he felt but couldn't name. Each developmental stage brought a new understanding of the loss, and with it, a new wave of grief. Welcome to this mini-series on understanding the language of grief, loss, and trauma. My name is Nathalie Himmelrich. I'm a somatic practitioner, psychological therapist, educator, and author, specialising in grief and trauma, and the host of the How to Deal with Grief and Trauma podcast. Grief and trauma are deeply human experiences, yet many of us struggle to describe what we are going through or to understand what others are facing. The vocabulary of loss is vast, varied, and sometimes overwhelming. In this short podcast episode series, we'll explore the different types of grief, loss, and trauma that people encounter throughout life. Each mini-episode serves both as an educational tool and a compassionate companion for anyone trying to make sense of their own experience with grief, loss, and trauma, or someone who is supporting someone else who is. These terms are more than labels. They are doorways into greater understanding, healing, and connection. Whether you are a bereaved parent, a caregiver, a therapist, or someone walking alongside a grieving friend or someone who's experienced trauma, these bite-sized episodes aim to give you language, insight, and tools. Each one includes a definition, some key considerations, an explanation of why it matters, relevant podcast episodes, and frequently asked questions that I have been asked by my clients and you, the listener of the podcast. And my answers are all grounded in both professional and lived experience. So let's begin. Developmental grief refers to the unique ways individuals, particularly children and adolescents, experience and process loss at different stages in their development. It acknowledges that grief is not a uniform experience. It varies based on age, developmental stage, personality, and life circumstances, all of which influence how one understands and copes with loss. So what you need to know is that grief doesn't stay in the past, it evolves alongside us. Children may not grasp the permanence of loss. Adolescents may wrestle with identity and peer relationships while grieving, and adults may find themselves reprocessing grief during major transitions like parenthood or retirement. These are not signs of regression, but reflections on how grief changes with us over time. So understanding developmental grief helps caregivers, professionals, and communities offer age-appropriate and emotionally attuned support. It normalizes recurring waves of sorrow and deepens our compassion for how grief can be expressed differently across the lifespan. So some of the key stages and responses. So children, they usually react with playfulness, confusion, and magical thinking, and they benefit from open dialogue and routine, depending on their maturity level. Adolescents often react with mood swings, withdrawal, identity exploration, and they often benefit from peer support and safe adults. Adults, they often respond with reflection, sadness, anxiety, all the emotions tied to grief. And what supports them best is through permission to grieve, peer community care, and a well-attuned therapist. Older adults often, their grief may blend with existential reflections or relief. Support through presence, meaningful legacy work can be of help to them. So many episodes on the How to Deal with Grief and trauma podcast touch on the topic of developmental grief as part of our conversations. So check the episode overview to find an episode that speaks to you. And as part of my first book, Grieving Parents, I wrote a whole chapter on developmental grief and how children and adolescents grieve the loss of their sibling according to their age and mental development. You can find more information on my website. So let's cover some of the questions. One that I often get is, why does grief return after so many years? People have the idea that then they haven't resolved it, but life transitions or milestones can reawaken old grief. Not because you're going backwards or because you haven't resolved it, but because new layers are being integrated. Another question that I often hear is, can children really grieve? Yes. They may express grief differently, as I said, through play or behavior or bodily symptoms, but they absolutely grieve the loss of a person. Obviously, depending on their age. So how can I support a grieving teen? I would recommend be present, encourage expression, but don't push it, and also don't push advice. More often, empathy and autonomy. So, is this kind of grief only about age? No, developmental grief also includes how we process loss based on emotional development, lived experience, and relational context. Clients say, what should I do if I'm overwhelmed by old griefs resurfacing, especially if a new loss is there? So again, acknowledge it, reflect with kindness, and consider speaking with a grief-informed therapist. Is it normal to grieve again during retirement or aging? Yes, because major life transitions often bring reflection and grief into a renewed focus. So what can you say to someone experiencing this? Similar to many other kinds of grief, your feeling makes sense. I'm here to listen at every stage. And some people have asked me, how can I prepare myself or others for these waves? So expect that grief may revisit. Compassionate awareness is the key. Just take every wave as it comes, as a reflection of your love. In the next episode, I will be talking about identity-related grief. So stay tuned. I hope this episode has helped you feel more grounded in the language of loss, grief, or trauma, and maybe even offered you some clarity, validation, or insight into your own experience or the experience of someone you care about. Grief and trauma are deeply personal, yet universal. When we can name what we're feeling, we take one powerful step closer to healing and the integration of our experience back into our life. If this series resonates with you, I invite you to keep exploring. You'll find more resources, courses, and ways to work with me at nathaliehimmelrich.com. And of course, you're always welcome to revisit any of the episodes whenever you need a gentle reminder that you're not alone. Until next time, take good care of your heart.